up, and welcome to another episode of Black in the Maritimes. I'm Fidel,
I'm Hillary.
I'm Clinton.
and today we have a guest, a very special guest, because I'm actually personally I'm a fan of the website. I've been a fan for a few years. We have Camille Dundas. She is a racial equity consultant. She's the founder of BuyBlacks.com. She was a solutions consultant as well. I mean, she's a jack of all trades. I mean, she's been on CTV News. I mean, you've done quite a lot. So welcome, Camille.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
So we were talking before we started recording that yeah, you never been to the Maritimes. You're going to come to the Maritimes, but you never been to the Maritimes.
I will, and I feel like an absolute failure as a Canadian. I feel like it's my duty to at least come out there one time. I feel like I can't call myself a real Canadian if I haven't been out there, you know? So I'm coming. I'm coming out there. I'm gonna at least come to Halifax, make it out to PEI. Maybe New Brunswick. We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah,
But I
I
gotta
mean,
come out
we're
I was
from
gonna
New
say if you
Brunswick.
come, so I was gonna say if you come once, go to PEI or Nova Scotia or something. But if you come twice,
there.
stop in New Brunswick.
Yeah. You go if you're a Black Canadian, go to the blackest places, Nova Scotia. That's where the most
Exactly.
Black Canadian history is. Then you can go to PI.
Exactly.
New Brunswick isn't. We live here, but it's all right. It is what it is. So, Camille, so tell us a bit about a little bit about you. Like, where did you grow up, and how did you grow up?
Oh, yeah. Well, I had an interesting kind of mishmash of how we grew up. I was born in Trinidad, and my parents came to Montreal first during a recession in Trinidad. So they decided to come back to Canada. They had been here. My mom had gone to McGill, and my sister was born here. They had kind of gone back and forth. And so they decided to come back to Trinidad, to Toronto. So we started off actually in Montreal first, then moved over to Toronto. So I was 4 years old when that happened. And then we stayed here till I was 12. And then my dad, who's from Saint Lucia, decided he was going to move us all back there. So then we all moved back to St. Lucia. So from age 12 to 21, I lived in St. Lucia, went to a convent high school run by nuns, the whole nine. It was like complete culture shift. Like whatever's the most extreme shift you can think of, like that's how it felt to me being 12. Coming from Toronto where I could say whatever I want at school, to the convent in St. Lucia where it was like you can say what you want, but you're gonna get some licks. And I was like, okay, this is some next level. And then I came back to Canada when I was 21 to start J school. So I went to Carleton Journalism School in Ottawa, and that's when I came back on my own.
Okay, so I'm originally Dominican. I'm in the Dominican right now.
Okay.
Now I will tell you about Caribbean schools.
Yeah.
Everybody wears uniforms.
Uniform.
Everybody wears uniforms, and different schools have different uniforms. So
That's right.
after school, people go to the park. That's usually where the other schools meet. And now,
Mhm.
if you skip school, people are gonna know who you are because of the uniform that you
That's
wear.
right.
So they're gonna
That's right.
know exactly who you. So and again, I grew up in Catholic schools, and nuns do not play.
No, no,
So
no.
they're very. So talk talk to me about when you were a little girl in Toronto
Yeah.
versus a girl in Saint
Hmm.
Lucia.
Yeah.
Like, what was the most shocking thing?
You know, I don't want to get too deep on you right away, but that's me. But I would say the most shocking thing to me, honestly, and it's interesting that you ask from a girl's perspective, was the normalization of sexual assault in public when we moved to the Caribbean. So living in St. Lucia was an atmosphere of having to kind of like accept that anyone can touch you, can like talk to you any type of way, and like you just kind of have to roll with that. Whereas in Canada, like we're really super strict about personal space and these types of things, and these things are taken really seriously. Whereas I was like 12, 13 years old in my school uniform, And I can remember one time, like this guy, I was getting on the bus, the little mini buses, like to get back home. And this guy was like calling me like, hey girl, like, I was literally 12. And so I just completely ignored him. And then that's like the worst you can do because they get really angry. And then I remember I was holding like two bags and my backpack. I was carrying some like school project. And as I was getting on the bus, he came and like bit my arm like so hard.
Oh my
And then
God.
the crazy thing is that like no one said anything. Like no one, like this was just like normalized. Like I found that, yes, and I didn't have the words like sexual assault like at the time. Like I didn't know what that was, but it was just so wild to me that that was just very normalized. So like older men being in a relationship with younger girls, like that was something we saw all the time. Like it was so normalized. Like it was very very hard to navigate that because when you would speak up, people would be like, whatever, well, you shouldn't have been doing this or you shouldn't have been doing that. So that was one of the biggest culture shocks for me was the immediate like attention, like public attention, that I didn't have when I was in Canada. Like I can't remember any time being that age and anyone even noticing me on the TTC. Like you just go by your business. You know what I mean? And I was one of those kids from like 8, 9 years old on the TTC. And I felt safe. I don't know if I was safe, but we never felt like anything, right? But I felt like a sense of not being safe when I was there.
Well, and one of the things that we try to emphasize about different cultures, and even if people like when people say black culture, I mean that's not really a culture because we're all so
Yeah,
different. We're
yeah.
also different in some places, but when you think about those islands in the Caribbean
Mhm,
and the West Indies and stuff like that, even Latin America within that
mhm.
sense, they're very misogynistic places.
Yeah.
There's there
Mhm.
and they're also very religious places as well.
Yeah.
They're both of the and one of the problems is that it's been ruled and done by men for so long that women are treated, and it's also by lack of education as well, that sometimes women are treated like objects
Mhm.
just because even in places like Saint Lucia, Trinidad, or Saint Martin's, people say like, oh, if you're not at this age, you're not married. If you're a woman, that's
Mhm.
weird for them. Like
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
odd. Or like if a man, you can't, if a woman maintains a man, that's weird as well, because they're like, oh,
Right.
like what do you mean? Like so yeah, I can definitely understand if you're coming from a big city like Toronto,
Yeah.
and then going to a small place like St. Lucia, especially with a place that again has that type of misogynistic, it must be well. So
But I
what
will
make
say though, what with one of the, I mean, there were so many. I don't regret my time living there. Like I absolutely got to love living there because of the amazing opportunities I got to have. Being in a smaller place helps sometimes, helps you to advance quicker. But one of the biggest differences on a positive note, was that sense of community. There's a trade-off, right? With a small, like as you know, living in a small town, right? There's a trade-off. Like everybody knows your business, but everybody knows your business. You know what I mean? And that was a huge difference from Toronto. There was support, right? Living in Toronto, I felt like isolated. Whereas now we had like all these cousins and people and like neighbors and all these people around who cared and who you couldn't mess up because they're going to tell your moms. You know what I mean? Like I tried to like do stuff like low key, underhanded, like whatever. I would get caught every single time. It's not like I wouldn't even learn to. I would just keep doing it, thinking, oh yeah, they won't notice that. They won't notice.
no
And
somebody will snitch. Somebody will
oh
definitely
yeah,
snitch.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's a big difference to the community, the support, and that network, having that village, right? That was amazing.
So what made your parents move to St. Lucia out of all of the places?
Yeah, well, my dad is from Saint Lucia, but the way it happened was that my dad is a civil engineer, and he was educated at University of West Indies. And when we came to Toronto, he could not, like many immigrants, could not get his qualifications recognized here. And so for the years that we were living in Canada, I saw my father do a range of odd jobs over that 7, 8 years, installing doors, cleaning carpets, driving a cab, you name it, right? And he was like a very proud person. And he would not, accept that they would not recognize his degree. So he was not going to do any conversion exams, any whatever. He was like, nope, this is my degree, and you'll accept it or F off. Like, that's the kind of guy he was, right? Well, we paid the price for that financially, let's say. Um, but that's who he was. And then he got an opportunity, a job opportunity in St. Lucia, and decided, you know what, just like screw this Canadian dream business, like we're going back. So we were, and I say we, the kids in the family, we were like very opposed to this. And we put forth like documentation and arguments. We put forward emotion of like why this is unfair, like, you know, whatever, you're taking me away from my friends, yada, yada, yada. And we didn't want to go there at all. But looking back, it truly was the best thing that could happen to me. I really attribute all of my work ethic, the confidence that I have in myself as a Black woman. It makes a huge difference in a Black person's life to grow up in a Black majority country. It makes a huge difference. And so
I
I
was
really, yeah.
I was gonna ask you that, at least you have the luck or the privilege to grow up
Hmm.
in a Black majority country
Yeah.
where everybody is Black and nobody really notices the difference because it is what it is. In fact, it's kind of sometimes the opposite. Now you're a grown woman when you come back to Canada. You're
Yes.
21 years old. You're an
Hmm.
adult. You got your friends in Saint Lucia. You graduated from there.
Hmm.
What was the first thing that you noticed when you came back that was kind of like, whoa, this is kind of different?
Yeah, it was such a strange duality for me because I was Canadian on paper, right? But of course, like had my St. Lucian accent. I had never even been back to Canada for a visit, like during that time, right? Like I was fully un-Canadianized. And the first thing that struck me was, okay, no one knows where St. Lucia is, and everyone thinks I'm from somewhere in Jamaica. So the first few weeks of university were just constant correcting people, being like, no, it's not in Jamaica. No, there's like a whole Caribbean chain with like different islands, you know? So it was like the first semester was just like educating people. Um, the other thing I noticed, you know, there's a really strange way. I don't know if it's just Canadians. I don't know if it's just white people as a whole, but I don't want to generalize. It's like a weird. Okay, I'll put it like this. You go to class, you meet someone in class, right? Tell me if you've experienced this, okay? So I know I'm not crazy. You sit next to them. You're like, hey, you talk, right? Okay. So you think, okay, you know this person, right? Like, okay, cool. And then the next day, you'll see them in the hallway and you'll be like, hey, and they'll just walk right by you.
Yep. Yes.
What the hell is that?
Yes.
I'm like, what? Like in St. Lucia,
Yeah.
that would if I meet someone new, like I know you now, like I see you, like yo, we good, you know, like I'll check for you. I'm gonna buy you a little patty, you know, we good. Like every time I see you, I'm gonna hail you up, you know. But here, it's like, and I could never understand it. I could never crack that code. I'm like, why do they treat you like that? Like, why? How can you be talking to me 1 minute and then I see you in the hall next day and you just walk right by like you don't know me? It was
And it's like, I think it's what you said before, that's the trade-off. I mean, when you grew up in countries there's a sense of community, right? Because I think if you travel to Latin America or some places, a lot of people know that the government won't help you, nobody help you. Whoever's going to
mm,
help you is your next door neighbor or or
mm,
your fellow president. So they depend. The
mm,
people in those communities depend more on them
yeah.
than them, and then systems. And here in Canada, I think it's a little bit, it has happened. The same thing that has happened to you has happened to me, and you're not crazy.
Okay.
It's happened to a couple of
Okay.
people.
That's a great
uh
way of intellectualizing that. I never thought of that because, you know, among Black people though here in Canada, like Black Canadian people who I met, they didn't do that, you know? So I was just like, why, what is going on? Like it was a weird, different culture, you know?
I found in university because I went to Université de Moncton, which has a very big French international population, and then lesser so of like mixed race people, and then there's the white population. And
Mhm.
any of the classes that had a lot of white people, the same thing, very cliquey. I'll say hi to you in class. I don't know you at lunch. I don't know you at other things. But then moving from New Brunswick to Toronto, every Black woman I walk by compliments me on my braids, on my
Yeah,
hair, on my
yeah.
skin. the black men I run into at Shoppers Drug Mart are giving me a nod hello. And that's a sense of community I never had in New Brunswick because I was one of 5 in high school. So for me, that just the culture shift of provinces has been, sounds like what you're describing, but the reverse. I like in Toronto, it's always like, hey, what's good? And I'm like, oh, hey, like that's something I never experienced in New Brunswick. It was lonely.
So what I'm describing happened in Ottawa. So even because I went to Carleton, so even moving after I was done at school, even just moving from Ottawa back to Toronto was a massive shift. And I was like, yes, I should have gone to Ryerson. I should have just stayed in Toronto, because even just like walking down Front Street and hearing Trini accents, hearing Jamaican accents, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm home. This is where I should be. And it was familiar to me because I had grown up there when I was much younger, right? So maybe let's just put it down to Ottawa, okay, y'all? I'm gonna give the rest of the white people a pass.
I've been there too, and I agree with that as well. That's where my dad is, and I'm like, I don't know these people. These people do not know me either.
Now, how was your experience like in university? Like you studied journalism? Was that what you studied?
Yes. So at Carleton, I was the only Black person in that entire program, in that entire journalism program. So, I mean, I can't say at the time that I focused on that. I was really I was on my own. So I was really hyper aware that I had to succeed. So I was, working, paying my own way, etc., that type of thing. So I was just extremely focused. So I would go out once in a while, but when I looked at like how the other kids were pretty much like, blowing their parents' money, I was like, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this, but I was very, very hyper focused. And it was a great experience. In hindsight, I do wish and if there's any journalism hopefuls watching, I did regret not going to a more hands-on program like something at Ryerson, because the program at Carleton is very academic. And so it wasn't until my 3rd year that I even picked up a camera. So I do regret that in a sense, but overall, good experience. I couldn't take the cold and I couldn't take the people.
So what made you study journalism? Like what made you be a journalist?
If you asked anyone in my family, they would tell you that I was going to be in media from the time I could talk. It was all I ever wanted to be. My mom was always like, okay, you're going to be like Christian Amanpour. You're going to be this, you're going to be that. Like my mom was like very into like television news. So she would always like make me watch everything with her, everything. Either I was going to be a writer, like a novelist, or a journalist. Like it was just all I ever wanted to do. I can't even tell you why. But there were things along the way that pushed me in that direction. My dad and I, on weekends in Saint Lucia, the newspapers come out on a weekend, and we had this kind of ritual where he would go and buy all the papers, and then we would come home and I would sit, like he would be on the chair and I would sit on the floor, and I would wait for him to finish reading the paper. He would give me the funniest part first, then when he was done reading the paper, he would hand it on to me, and then he would read the other one, then he would hand it on to me. And all the other kids like weren't interested in reading or like anything like that, and so I would just sit there like poring over the pages of the newspaper, and by the end of the afternoon, like our fingertips were covered in ink, but like I loved just looking through it. And I remember something that stuck out to me from one of those newspapers was on the masthead was the phrase, the pen is mightier than the sword. And I thought, wow, I think my 13 or 14-year-old brain was like, okay, that means that I can have power through my words. Like I can do something, I can have power. And as someone who felt powerless as a young girl living in that situation, in that environment rather, I wanted power. I wanted some type of control over my life. I wanted to be able to make a dent somewhere. And I thought, wow, if my words can change people and change things, then that's where I want to be. It just so happened that the house that we lived was about 20 steps away from the national television news broadcaster. Happenstance. And there was this show that used to come on called Video Vibes, and it was like a music show, like whatever, right? And my friend and I, we used to watch this. We're like, you know what? This show is so crappy. Like we could do such a better job than this. She goes, let's write them a letter. Let's tell them that we should host. I'm like, yeah. So we write this letter. We drop it. I go walk and I drop it off. We're just like trying to hype ourselves up. Do you know they called us and they're like, yeah, why don't you guys come and host this show? They didn't pay us, of course. But we were like, what? We're like, yes. So we're 17, okay? And we go and take over this guy's show and start hosting this show. And do we not like double, triple the ratings? They get all kinds of sponsorship, KFC's advertising, this, all like the big companies are advertising. It was the best summer of my life. Like we were little celebrities, like in our own right. Just walk onto the set and just start interviewing people. Like no training, no nothing, like zero, nothing. Just pure hubris, right?
So
And
hold
then,
up. You hosted a show in Saint
yeah.
Lucia by
Oh
sending a
yeah.
letter.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Wow.
It was a whole summer, like a whole season, like and at least 20 something episodes. I wish I could find it. I kind of wish it's buried somewhere. And then one night, the director told me, hey, do you want to watch How We Make the News? I'm like, yeah. So I sat in the newsroom and the lights went down and he started counting down and I was like, oh my God, like mind blown. I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is where I want to be. Like, just, it was such a rush. Like, I was like, this is awesome. It was like a combination of like movies and theater and acting and but like real life and like everything together. And I was like, this is me. This is what I'm gonna do. And so I decided to pursue television.
Oh wow, that is an amazing story. So you just one day you said I could do it better than this guy, and you just said that is quite remarkable actually. I mean, I had some experience here at local TV stations and radio stations, and I mean again I think that's the trade-off because you're in a smaller place, you have
That's
access
what
to
I'm
that.
saying. That's what I was
That
alluding to by opportunities, right? Like, I don't think I could have ever done that in Toronto. I couldn't roll up to Much Music and be like, yo, I can do this better. Like, come on, you know? It's not happening, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, that George Stephanopoulos guy, no, the Strombonopoulos, whatever. I can do it better than him. Yeah, that's right.
I
So,
heart to Strabo though. He's amazing. The other amazing opportunity I got in one of my last years in St. Lucia was getting to write about Nelson Mandela's life and perform a poem for him and meet him and present him with the poem that I wrote. Like that was one of the most memorable points of my life ever. And it was because every year at school I would perform, like I would write entire plays and poems and I would, and you know, there's a, maybe the same thing in DR, there's a high like focus on the arts in the Caribbean, right? Like at school, every year we do elocution, we do like drama competitions, we do singing competitions, like inter school competitions, right? Like there's a high focus on this. So my principal said, hey, Nelson Mandela is coming to St. Lucia for like a state visit. She's like, we want you to write an ode to his life. I'm like, wow, okay. So I wrote this, performed it with like 3 other girls, and then there was a children's school choir behind us, like backing us up. All these like that video I do have, so that one I can send you. There was like international media there, like writing us down, like we get to perform this thing, put it on a plaque, walk over, hand it to him, get a hug from him, and he's like, this is so amazing, y'all, it's so special, beautiful. And I'm like that's a once in a lifetime moment, right? Like I don't think these are again opportunities I wouldn't have had elsewhere. So
that definitely is a once in a lifetime moment. I hope you have a picture of that because that is priceless.
yeah, I have pictures and I do have a grainy video somewhere on my drive. So.
Well, I know that's definitely so. I mean so going back to school, you did have a bunch of opportunities and you had experience in the media business in St. Lucia. You know what you want, which is kind of good because when you know it early, I mean, we don't get to not all of us get to know what we want in an early age. At
Yeah.
least you got something that you wanted to do in an early age, so that's great. That gets you ahead. So you start studying and you try to finish. What's the end goal? Do you have an end goal at that moment when you're in university, and what was it at that time?
Yeah. Wow, you bring me back. So, my end goal at that time was to get a job on the Fifth Estate, the CBC's Fifth Estate. Like, that was my only goal in life. Okay. I adored that show. I adored everyone who worked on it. I'm like, because it's investigative journalism, it's documentary, it's like, that was my thing. After I graduated, the year I graduated, I went to Rwanda to make a documentary. And I stayed in Rwanda for about 2 months. We made this documentary, my classmate and I, her name's Andrea Thompson, shout out to Andrea. And it was about women's access to contraception. It came about in the weirdest of ways because the house we were staying in, I had birth control pills in the closet of the room. The housekeeper came in, was cleaning the room, and she brought the pills to me and she said, "Can I have one of these?" And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, like, yeah, I was so confused because I'm like, you can't just take one. I'm like, this is something you take every day. And she was like, "Oh, my friend is pregnant and she doesn't want to be pregnant." And I was like, "Oh." So one, I just went into like, help mode right away. I'm like, okay, let's talk to your friend. Like, let's figure out what we can do. And in doing that, started to realize what the situation was like for women there, where number one, the education level about contraceptives was so low because it was pretty much prevented by the church. Like they would just prevent anyone from talking about this. And culturally, like you were saying, when you're married, your husband expects you to have a baby right away. And if you don't have a baby, the husband will leave the wife and the family will fully support that. And so we decided to do some research about this. And we found this one group of renegade doctors who were pretty much risking their lives, traveling from village to village, educating women about condoms, about birth control, about this. So there were places and pockets where you could access this stuff, but it was so like underground. So I found this so fascinating that me, like as a 20-something-year-old, like take this for granted that I can, get birth control wherever, right? And that was the first doc that I made. And so I came back to Canada and I had this job waiting for me at the CBC. I'm like, awesome, it's my first job. I met by chance one of the hosts of the Fifth Estate at another chance event that I got invited to at the Governor General's residence. I was working at CBC and they were having some, Michael Jean was the GG at the time, and they were asking for a young journalist to come, and the HR person said, "Hey, you should go." I'm like, I can't go to the Governor General's office. I'm like, I don't have any clothes. Like, I was like dirt poor, like just starting this job, come out of school. She's like, I'll help you. Never forget, her name is Kelly. Awesome lady. She brought to the office like 6 different dresses in like 6 different sizes. I'm like, why do you have all these sizes? She's like, because these are all the sizes I've been, okay? Don't judge me. I'm like, okay. And then we go into the bathroom. I try on all these dresses and she literally loans me a dress to go to this event. I meet one of the hosts there and I saw her and I was like, oh my God. I literally took a drink to get courage. And I went to her, I'm like, I'm your biggest fan. Like I have this documentary. I can't remember what I told her, but she's like, okay, here's my card. Call me if you want to come to Toronto and I'll get you to speak to someone. I go to Toronto, I call her. She sets up a meeting with the head of the documentary department in CBC, right? Remember at this time, like I'm just out of school, okay? Like confidence level is, right? And I walk into the guy's office. He sits me down and he says to her, okay, cool, okay, see you later. She does the introduction and she leaves us, right? As soon as she closes the door, he says to me, all right, I'm only speaking to you because of her, so let's make this fast. Let's get this over with. And I was like, okay. So I pitch him the doc. I tell him the story about the women, about this and this, whatever. There was a Canadian connection. We had found these nuns who were Canadian, who opened this like health center there. They were kidnapped during the genocide. Like that, this amazing story, And he goes, why would I give you money to do that when I have like 10 journalists sitting here who can do the same? So I did my pitch. I said, my value and this, whatever. He's like, okay. And he literally patted me on the thigh, patted me. And he was like, listen, what you need is a sugar daddy. You need someone to finance your first film, okay? And if you're able to finance it on your own, I'd be impressed. If you come back to me, that would really impress me, and then maybe I will give you a chance.
Wow.
I feel like I'm watching a movie right here. I feel like I'm sitting here watching a movie. I gotta I gotta interject. Wow.
Listen, that, and I still can, like, as I'm telling it to you, I feel like the feeling that I felt. I remember walking onto Front Street, just being like, fuck, like this is real life. Like this is reality. Like this is what I didn't, and I have to admit to you, I absolutely allowed that to crush my dreams. Like I gave up after that. I completely gave up. My goal, like I told you, my goal was to be a documentary filmmaker and like to be on the Fifth Estate. And I was like, okay, I'm done. I'll figure something else out. I did, maybe a year after that, get an interview with the heads of the Fifth Estate, different people. And I almost got a job there. It was down to me and another guy apparently. And the mistake I made, and if there's any young people watching about interviewing, right? Like because I was a super fan of the Fifth Estate, I knew like every episode. I could describe, like I knew the show inside out, right? And so whatever he was asking me during the interview, I was like, yeah, this, and this, and here's what I would do differently, and I was on fire. At the end, he's like, okay, do you have any questions for us? And I was like, no. I said, like I know this show. Like I don't have any questions about the show because I know the show, And I'm like, this is this. And he told me transparently, he's like, that's what lowered your score on the interview. And that's what gave the other person like a leg over you because you didn't ask any questions. And I was like, damn. And so that's something to remember about just interviewing skills. Like I didn't even know that was a thing at the time. Like I just walked in just being myself and just, just my passion and my love for the show I felt would be enough, but yeah. So that was a tough blow to get so close to my dream job and then to have it taken away. But he was really nice about it. I got to say, he's like, you are so talented. Like, please stay in touch. Like, he was very nice about it.
I mean, you got close. You got really, really close. So that's that. So Clinton, you had a question. Clinton, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Sorry, y'all. Yeah, wow. I feel like that kind of like a breaking point for you. Sort of like you could have kind of given up and gone a different direction at that point, or you just kept on moving on to get to that next level. And we know you did. We've learned so much about your life, and I have some other questions for you just about work and career. So you worked for CTV for I'm not sure how many years as a consultant, or were you on the air? And then also, of course, I'd love to talk about the website a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. My first job out of school was at the CBC. So I was there for a year. I did a program where you start off, you do like a 1-year program, 6 months in radio, 6 months in TV. That's the program where I accidentally found out I was a diversity hire, by the way. So there was that. No one bothered to tell me that it was like a program for diverse students. I was like, cool. And then, so I did that. It wasn't a super great experience. I was on the air, which was great. Like that's what I thought I wanted. And then when I realized how much micromanaging is involved with on-air talent, I was like, oh no, this is not going to work. And I realized that producers have way more power. I started getting into producing. So when I left Ottawa was during the recession, the Great Recession, 2008. And I came to Toronto and I started all over again. And I was doing an unpaid internship at City TV. And I was teaching English online at night, like to pay my rent. So I was teaching English to these like men in Saudi Arabia, these like businessmen. It's another weird story. Because like you weren't allowed, like I wasn't allowed to like show my arm. Like I had to be like this, like the entire time. It was super interesting experience. Yeah. But doing that to pay rent, doing the unpaid internship. So, and by the way, it was from like midnight to 4 o'clock because of the time difference, right? That I was doing the teaching, sleep for a bit, go to the internship, then like hit up friends of mine or people I had met in the city who were videographers, like lie my way into fashion shows, into like places, be like, yeah, I work with City. Meantime, I'm an unpaid intern. But just to get like stuff for my demo reel, I needed stories for my reel, right? So I would be hustling, hitting the streets, like doing interviews, putting stories together, so I could shop my reel around the place, right? And so did that. They strung me along. said, oh yeah, we have a job for you. The unpaid internship went on for 7 months. This is now today illegal. But 7 months I worked there unpaid. And then I was like, okay, I'm done with this. I went to work like as a receptionist at a hair salon. And then I applied to go teach English in South Korea. And I got accepted. I was doing everything. And then I met my husband. And I did not go to South Korea. And
Wow.
so coincidentally, the same time I met my husband, I got a call from CP24 asking me to cover a mat leave. And so I said, okay, I met this guy. There's this job. It's a 1 year, but all right, South Korea isn't going anywhere. Let me do the 1 year. And then I ended up just staying in with Bell Media for the next 7 years and starting By Blacks with my husband.
Okay, wow. So how many years has it been since you two founded and launched byblacks.com?
Yeah, By Blacks was founded in 2013, so about eight years now. And it was Roger's idea. It started off as just the business directory, and a friend of ours said, "Hey, that's great, but you need to give people a reason to come back to this website. Why don't you do stories about them?" And so me, with my journalistic background, it just kind of made sense that I would come on as editor in chief, and he is the publisher. So he deals with the business side, the sales side. He comes up with all the bright ideas that you see on the site, like Black Restaurant Week, the People's Choice Awards, like all those things that keep the momentum going. He comes up with all those amazing ideas, and I focus on the editorial.
Oh wow,
That's
that's
really
pretty
cool.
cool.
Thank you.
Sorry, I just have one more question regarding the By Blacks website. And so I'm just curious, like, so during 2020, you must seen like a huge uptick in interest and viewership and stuff to the website. And just like a lot of other articles that we've read, how sort of like the wave has died down, companies that pledged support didn't really offer their support, the guilt is fading away. Just to kind of cross-reference,
Mm-hmm.
what's the change now from like 2020 to 2021? I'm sure like still huge growth and way more than ever before, but as people turn their attention to the
Mm-hmm.
new topic of the month or the new issue of the Times, how has that changed?
Yeah. And and this is my observation. The way I see that is through the business side of the business, sales side of the business, right? So it's me just observing kind of like what Roger is going through and eavesdropping on those conversations, right? And not much has changed on the editorial side because we was always talking about black people. So we still gonna talk about black people, right? And but for sure, first with the pandemic, everything was like we were everything got cut off, like income completely, sales were just like zero, like because our sales are still it's our revenue model is ads, right? It's ad driven, and a lot of those ads were event based, and so when events were done, so were the ads. Everyone pulled the plug. So we're like, okay, we'll just keep going. Then after the racial revolution, as we like to call it, there certainly was a lot of performative support. We didn't see, I can't tell you that I saw like a wave of donations and in fact, we're not set up to receive donations or anything like that, but like we set up a Patreon or whatever, but that didn't really go anywhere. What has shifted though long term is I feel like there is more, and I'll put it this way, bargaining power on our end. It feels like something has shifted in the sense that no, we don't have to accept that anymore. So when, HBO or Cineplex or wherever, like these big, corporations email now being like, oh, hey, can you promote this on your site? And we'll give you like 6 free tickets, like, which is what they would do like you know, pandemic. We'd still say no. But now, and if Roger was here, he would tell you, he feels no ways about telling them like why he's saying no. Like he will fully be like, in this like environment, I think it would be prudent for X company to show more support for the Black community by actually investing in Black businesses. I think that you should, like, he just like goes in on them now, right? Whereas before he maybe would just ignore it, but now like he goes in, right? And I feel like there's a little bit more, like I said, because we have like this bargaining power now. It's like, no, like we need to remind you, like, we do not have to accept this shit from you anymore. So we're going to tell you we're not accepting it, and we're going to tell you why.
Oh man, you know what? As soon as you said that, I instantly identified with that. And I've never vocalized that before, but I was actually kind of talking about it a few days ago. I'm a business owner here in this town here, and we're all over social media, right? And one thing I was saying is that whereas pre-COVID and you called it the racial revolution,
Yeah, yeah, just
as a business owner, you know, I always had to be so sensitive, so polite, so nice, so afraid of getting people's like
yes,
sort of, it's a salon spa, like hatred lashing out on me. I couldn't defend myself. We just had to kind of like take it like,
yes,
oh, like here's your 6 free tickets.
yeah,
And one thing that I found has really changed in my business since then is I'm a lot more confident in sticking up for myself, for my team, calling out lies if people are saying things like, it doesn't happen often, but even if it happens like twice a year, calling out people's lies about us, like when they're, and similar to your husband Roger, like I feel like, and I feel like I can do that because the first time I did it, I didn't get that sort of backlash from the mobs of the internet,
yeah,
just kind of teaming up to attack my business. So
And
a bit
what I
different
want
but
to
similar.
point out for that, and this is a point that I hammer home, the reason that, and I call, like, we're okay, let me say this politically correct. Okay, Black people who are either business owners or who work in like corporate Canada, like we have a nice, comfortable situation happening, right? The only reason that we are empowered now to call these things out is because of our Black peers who have been risking their lives and livelihood in the streets protesting.
Yeah. Yes.
And
Wow. Yeah.
the reason I call this out is because what I noticed, some of the conversations I noticed was like, oh, like, what's the point? Like, why are they protesting again? There's a lot of Black people who are having these type of conversations. Like, oh, what's the point? Like, they're just wasting time. Like, why do they keep protesting? They're just, and I was like, hold up. You better basically bow down and be thankful to them, because without that street protest, we would not have this newfound confidence. We would not have the confidence to call out our bosses now, to be like, oh, actually, no, actually, that was racist. Here, let me tell you why. We wouldn't have that. And so, as Black people, I want us to remember that we need all different forms of pushback, all different forms of protest, of rebellion, in order to get to our goal, right? Just because you're a Black person who doesn't go in the street and protest, that doesn't make you any better than anyone. You have to be finding something that you can do in your corner that feels authentic to you to protest, to push back against the system. And so every day I thank, and the thing is, the Black people who are out protesting are some of the most marginalized among us. They have the most to lose. And they are out there fighting for me. They are out there on the front lines getting arrested, getting caught on camera, having their livelihoods at stake, right? Bringing their kids along. And so I want us to remember that we all need each other in this fight.
I've been on this show almost a year and a half, and I gotta say, I've never heard things put in that perspective in that kind of way before. So thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's pretty cool that what you said, because I think that's one of the reasons why I myself started the podcast. And I tell people this all the time. I'm like, I am not the marching guy. I am not going to be out there, rah, rah,
Yeah.
but I do have a way of pushing against the system. And this is
Yeah.
one of the ways that we kind of do this, just because of the fact that there's different, I feel like, and again, I don't know if people have read this book. I really recommend it. It's called The Art of War. It's a very, very old book. I think people
Mhm.
could say that there's different ways of view. Like, it's just not one way to win a war. You cannot just be like, oh, if you have it's not the guy that has the best missiles. It's not the guy that has the most troops. It's the person that has the best strategy, and you can hit with different strategies depending on where you are. So I think that what you said is really important, because people can find, you don't have to march. You can, if that's what you want to do,
Yes.
and you can protest and be the loudest voice. That's definitely commendable, supported, but there's different ways to start pushing back against some things, and I think that's pretty important. Now, I wanted to ask you something, because I mean, you set up all the positions that you worked at CTV, CP24. You pretty much worked at all the major TV providers
Yeah.
in Canada. That's
Yeah.
basically what we could say. I mean, the only one that you're missing maybe be APTN, but
Global.
that's a different, and
Yeah.
global. Okay. And
It-
those pretty two. That's the only two that I could say. And one probably you won't get there for obvious reasons. But the global is definitely. But I feel that when it comes to those type of positions, when it comes to journalism, TV, communications, media, you feel that, and that has happened to me in different stages, in different types of environments in Canada, that you're the only black person in the room.
Mhm.
And it's like that. And when it comes to journalism and media, I seen that in Canada that we're not that diverse. We're trying now. Definitely we're trying now. But we definitely seems like there's missing something. Did you ever realize that every time you went to one of those jobs that you had?
Absolutely. And what I would say is that in the beginning, like in my first job, yes, I was certainly the only black person in the room, and I was the most junior person. And what I did at that point was I tried to be as unblack as possible. I tried to be as I tried to assimilate as much as I could, because I thought that that's what I needed to do to succeed. And so I didn't pitch any stories from the community. I tried to distance myself from my own community as much as I could, until one day I was coming out. Can I cuss on this, or is that going to be
Yeah, of
edited?
course you can curse all you want.
One day I was coming out of the hairdressers on Bank Street, getting my 24-inch weave, because that's what I needed to do to look like the other white girls on air, right? And I came out of the hairdresser onto the street, and I remember it was a bright sunny day, and I was feeling myself, boy. So I'm walking down the street, going to catch my bus to go home, and this white man is walking towards me. I didn't pay no mind, but as he gets closer to me, he leans in and says, "You nigger bitch."
I got called the same thing on Bank Street. I got called a skinny nigger bitch
Ottawa,
outside the Beaver Tail stand in Ottawa.
right? And I was like, wow. And I tell you that only because it was a moment for me where I realized, I was like, damn, girl, like, no matter what you do, you are black. So you know what? Get used to it and start loving it. Because no matter what you do to yourself, that's how they see you.
That's the story of OJ by Jay-Z. Anyone who's listening, they should go check that
Oh,
song out. Yeah.
God. And from that time, I said, okay, I'm the only black person in the room, then I'm going to bring these black stories. Because I looked around and I said, well, if no one else is bringing these, then how are these stories getting told? And so I just started to be unapologetic about it. Over the years, I just started pitching I didn't pitch a story because it was black. I pitched amazing stories that happen to be black that need to be told. And I was just unapologetic about it. And I would just call stuff out either through humor or through, like, I remember one time we were going to, every morning you do like a pitch meeting, right? And actually there was one other black woman who worked on the team with me, and we were finishing up some other work, so we came to the meeting a couple minutes late, and all the seats were taken, so we just stood there. And then one of the guys made a joke. He's like, "Oh, you guys got to sit in the back." I said, no, those days are over. We ain't sitting in the back, bro." I'm like, make room, make room. And everyone laughed, but he was like, his face was like blush red, like he was so embarrassed, like he's like, that's not you know how they get, when you like very defensive, right? Or it's February 4th and I pitch a Black History Month story, and the white producer's like, "Aren't we done with Black History Month now? Like, do we still need this? Like, aren't we done?" Like that's the type of responses you would get, right? So you have to like be on it. You have to stand up for it and keep pushing, or else it just goes by the wayside.
Yeah, and I think I had said this many times in different places, and it it comes sometimes like you say it so much, like, hey, like, let's do this, let's do that, like, to teach them, and people come with like, oh, it's not Black History Month or things like that. Then eventually you become what they call the angry black man or the
Oh
angry
yeah.
black woman, that you're like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, like I'm not trying to be rude, but like, it's only like, if you guys are like allies or not racist, then how come I'm the only black person here? Or how come there's only two of us and we only get to do this once a month or twice a week or whatever, and you guys do it every day? And I think
Yeah.
that's
And
that.
now, yeah. I really enjoy my position on the outside of mainstream media as a media critic, because now I just get to like collect. I have a document where I collect all their faux pas, and then I'm hoping like one day I'll get hired to just like tell them all about it. Like every time I'm like, oh, they'll put that in the file. Like when you mentioned Black History Month, I will see on like city TV. I have no problem saying their name either. All of them do this. So it's not just them. All of them do this. Where Black History Month, right? You'll see a news package, a story about like a young entrepreneur, like an 18-year-old who starts this awesome cupcake business or whatever. And I'm like, awesome. What the hell does that have to do with Black history? When 364 days of the year, y'all feature the most basic ass white people doing the most basic stuff, like starting a cupcake company. Nothing against cupcakes, love it. But do you see like the difference in how in the coverage? Like white people just have to do the bare min and they'll get coverage. But if I start a cupcake company, I have to wait till Black History Month? Why? Like they don't even see this stuff. They don't even realize, they think they're doing a good thing. Oh, but we featured them. I'm like, but this is not Black history. Like a young kid starting a company, like that should be everyday coverage. That should be everyday news, just like when you feature a white person. But it's so hard for them to see their own biases. It's very difficult.
Well, and it also it happens a lot in the tech sector, right? Like every time a basic, if somebody that's Caucasian does the basic thing and they get featured, like, well, one of the biggest stories, and I don't know if you guys ever seen it, is the Elizabeth Holmes. She had a company called Theranos,
Yeah.
and it was all a fraud. And
Yeah.
this white
Hmm.
woman, very
Hmm.
very very eloquent, very beautiful
Yes,
woman.
attractive and yes,
Yeah,
fit the part.
and
Hmm.
and she got billions of dollars, and
In
she had a
funding. Yeah.
fraud. And in America, there is I don't know if it's Ulsa Burns. I think she was the first black CEO of Xerox.
Mm.
Ursula Burns, that's her name. She
Okay.
broke history. She literally the first
Hmm.
black woman to ever become CEO, ever do everything, didn't get even half or a quarter or no. She has a book right now. She gets
Mm.
zero coverage of everything. And you're like, wait a minute, this woman beat the odds.
Mm.
Literally, she beaten the odds of succeeding, and gets zero. And this girl that dropped out of school did a fraud, and she got billions of dollars in mainstream attention. But again, that's something that we kind of understand because of the color of her skin. And again, if Oprah can get it on Switzerland by being black, we can all get it. Like that's pretty much like
Yeah, yeah.
that's
But
that's how I.
there's real harm done through media bias. Like it's not just, okay, exclusion, but it's actual harm that these biases can cause when, for example, putting up like I think it was no, it was CTV that got called out the other day. That's why I love social media now. Like Twitter is gonna come for you. Black Twitter will come for you. CTV put up a photo of this story out of, I believe it was Australia, where the mother had murdered her children, and it so happened the children had a black nanny. And they took a photo of the nanny holding pictures of the children, like looking sad. And they used that photo for the tweet, but the headline was mother, like murderer, like basically the title was showing that like the black nanny was the one who killed the children. Like that's what it was implying. And people called them out immediately. But I was able to get a screenshot from my files. But then they deleted it, right? But this happens over and over again, especially with young black men in Toronto, when who are caught up in the system, or and they, even when they're murdered, they decide to use a mugshot instead of their graduation photo, and then you see the difference in how white men who commit crimes are treated in the media. It's a complete, it's so obvious to me and to the rest of us, and you just keep scratching your head like, how can you not see this?
The most recent example is the young kid in the States that murdered the protesters on the street. I think he was 17.
Yes.
I said this on the show back then. All the photos I could find of him were pictures of him like by a lake or on a sports team or like with his family. There's not a single mugshot, nothing. They made him look like this nice little kid. And every story with the black person is always the mugshot. It's always like worst possible.
What you have to understand about that is that police are complicit with media in this system, because what the excuse that the media will use is, oh well, we're just using the photo that the police sent us.
No, it's not an accident.
So if the police don't send anything, then you go off and look for your own, right? But the police will decide whether they want. There's a mugshot for that guy, I can tell you that. There's a mugshot for everyone who's been through the system, right? But if the police do not release that mugshot to the media, it's intentional. It's intentional. Think about it, right? Think about the fact that everyone who has been accused of a crime has a mugshot, but the police decide when not to release that to the media.
But you also got to ask the question of like that housekeeper and the nanny. Like, was that really an accident, or did someone in marketing think like, this could be some good clickbait? Maybe I can slide this under the radar.
True. Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off.
No, you're right. So there's real harm done there. So I could talk about that for hours.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we as black people notice is that not only that they put us in a different light, but they don't even give us to tell our side of the story. Like, even if a kid, like the one thing that I've seen is like, when something happens to a victim, or I don't know, or let's say like a robbery or anything like that, and a black man does it, they just put the story there. When a white kid does it, they try to get the parents' perspective or anybody else. They don't try to get the other black narrative unless they're killed or something that or it's on video that we all saw it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is crystal clear. Like, we saw this. There's no way you can refute that.
You see, and that is white violence at work, I can tell you that. Because what they're doing is they have to contextualize it. They have to give you all the reasons why this could possibly end up like this. Because naturally he couldn't. But for a black individual, it's expected. It's expected that you be violent. It's expected that you're going to be in a gang. That's the message that you're getting through those editorial choices.
And tell us about something. I mean, because you're in that much experience that you had in journalism, the state of black media in Canada. I mean, in our region, in Atlantic Canada, it's very limited, but everything is very limited. When you go to places like Toronto and you know, things are getting bigger, but what do you think is missing from black media in Canada that you have seen over the years?
More of our own platforms, and more journalists. And I'm not talking people who graduate with a journalism degree, because that's not even what I'm looking for in journalists that buy blacks. I'm looking for people with something to say, right? And I'm looking for people with a point of view. I'm looking for people with ideas, with, you know, that can analyze things, that can give me an opinion on something, right, that I haven't heard before. And I feel like it is the empowerment of that group, right, is changing. It's coming. But I feel like we've been disempowered for so long that we have not felt safe or empowered to bring those voices forward. You'll notice in Black America, they're a lot more for like forthright, I put it that way, direct. There's almost like we have this like fear, Black people in Canada, this fear of speaking out. I'll see something wild happening and I'd be like, wow, if this happened in the States, like there would be an uproar. But in Canada, like just take like the blackface with Justin Trudeau, right? Like, look how quickly that went away. Like there's something about us here in Canada that I don't know if it's an apathy or it's just like whatever, okay, you know, or if it's a real fear. I haven't put my finger on, or maybe it's a mixture, a combination of things, right? But there is a level of collective power that I think we're still working on.
I think one of the answers for that is, I think Dr. George Elliott Clark said it to us in one of the interview that he gave us. I think Canada has done an amazing job at erasing Black history and erasing Black hate and erasing Black slavery. Like I think that's one of the things that, like, for example, we in Canada, we joy about us beating the Americans and burning the White House, right? But that was before it was a country, before Canada was even declared as a union. Well, guess what? We also had slavery before Canada was.
Surprise! Yeah.
And when you come to the narrative and saying like, oh, there was slavery, oh no, but that was before the union, and I'm like, yeah, so did the White House thing. But you guys count that, but you don't count the other one. And I think that's one of the reasons that when you look at the Justin Trudeau blackface thing, I think one of the reasons that we forgot so quickly is because Canada has done a good job promoting itself as this multicultural melting pot like type of thing.
I always call it the best branding exercise in the world. Like
exactly,
it really should be studied, honest to God. Like it's incredible.
Yeah, we have as a country, we have done this, saying, oh, this is a great country, free healthcare, we're better than the States. That's the like we've been branded as that, but we forget to say like, oh wait, there was slavery, there's racism, you know, there's inequality, there's all the other stuff that everybody else has, but we try not to show that. So I think that's one of the biggest things. But I think I do agree with you in that part, that we kind of need more, just because of the fact that we have so many stories in different places of the country.
Yeah.
But the fact is that when you take a look at certain aspects of the stories, they will never get heard, or will never be heard, because there's just not the people finding it or the platforms to do it. So I mean,
yeah, in the consulting work that I do, I speak a lot about Black Canadian history, and every time I bring up, you know, certain things, people's jaws are always on their tables, because they just can't fathom why they never learned about this. And it's very confronting, I think, for people, because you've had this vision, this idea. So one of the first things I play is, you remember that Heritage Minute? Pa ain't gonna make it. Oh no! You remember that Heritage Minute with the with the Underground Railroad? Oh, we free now. We in Canada, right? That is what I grew up.
I remember it now.
You remember that, right?
He's in Canada.
We's in Canada, right? And he's hiding in the bench and he gets up, right? Whatever. That's the image that I grew up on of Canada. We're the savior of the slaves. We're right, and that is true. I don't get it twisted. I love it here, right? But let's be real about it. If we want to really dismantle these systems of oppression, we have to start with identifying how we got here. And when people start hearing that there were motions put forth in government to limit and to stop the immigration of Black people to this country, the reason? Unsuitable for the climate. And to me, that was laid the groundwork for the diplomatic brand of racism that Canada has produced, right? If you look at a place like Chatham, I think it's Chatham, whose claim to fame, no, Dresden, Ontario, whose claim to fame is being one of the stops on the Underground Railroad. Yes, true. But it's also the same town that made national headlines when an author from, interestingly, from Maclean's magazine wrote this expose about like how, and the title was Jim Crow Lives in Dresden. And it exposed how segregated that town was, right? In that interview, the mayor at the time said, I really wish the papers would stop writing about this because everyone is treated equally here. But you know what? It's a free country and you can't force businesses to serve Negroes. That was his comment. That was his comment in the interview. And when you start to comb through transcripts from Parliament and realize that the N-word was being used in Parliament. In 1918, there's a quote that I pulled from a parliamentarian who said, let us preserve for the sons of Canada the lands that are proposed to be given to the N-word. Like, come on, like, you know, and when you start pointing out all of your heroes, how all McGill and the founder of McGill University, all of your heroes were slave owners, people start getting real uncomfortable, very uncomfortable.
Ryerson,
yeah. It's also when you say, for example, in the Maritimes, if you look at the government, you see that, for example, in New Brunswick, there's no black people in any position of government in any shape or form. There's not even a black supervisor of anything. And you go ahead, like what? Sorry, go ahead.
We did get our first black mayor.
Oh,
in
yes.
June, didn't we?
Yeah, well, there's the black mayor in Edmonton. Edmonton?
No, he's in
no,
I think Kasim.
Town.
No, sorry, Edmonton, I mean.
Yeah. No, he's up north.
Sorry, I always get it.
But when I mean when I mean
include him now.
But that's what I mean. When I mean government, I'm not talking about municipal or elective, because he got elected. I'm talking about the head of sanitary, or like the person that helps you do the paperwork of your license, or the person that or maybe somebody that will be able to change the narrative of a department of labor or things like that. There's no black people in charge of anything. And then you realize that, yes, we are a minority, and that's totally fine. But then you get to realize that because there's nobody there or anybody, you get the lower wages, you get the lesser jobs, or you get no jobs, right? You get jobs in inferior positions. So I think what aggregating to what you're saying is that we are pretty good at hiding that, but when you talk about that, it gets really uncomfortable. It gets into an uncomfortable conversation. That I feel like black media should exploit that type of conversations because they're necessary. So I think that's a very good access. So when you look at your site, like By Blacks, and you and your husband are the ones that collaborating. I mean, now we're at the age of digital, right? We're all kind of scrambling because, again, I think you just said you go by ads and revenues and things like that. Like, when it comes to the aspect of social media for black people, do you think that's helped us in some type of way, or do you think there needs to be some type of changes regarding that? Because I mean, it has helped amplify voices, but it also has kind of messed up certain things like advertising revenue, and sometimes even some voices get more amplified than others.
Yeah, and certainly some voices are intentionally stifled. So on that note, there have been a lot of drawbacks, I think, for marginalized folks, in the sense that we have been censored where we don't need to be censored. The same way we're censored in real life is exactly how it happens on social, where you get penalized at work for calling out racism. The same thing happens to you on Facebook and Instagram, where you're talking about racism and they're like, oh, actually, that's offensive. And you get banned. So there's that. However, I do strongly believe that there is more benefits than drawbacks for Black people specifically. Black Lives Matter would not be Black Lives Matter without Twitter. These social platforms have allowed us to collaborate, have allowed us to be able to come together and off of traditional platform. So I think that we have optimized and gotten the most out of these social media platforms and used it to our advantage, as we always do, because Black people are innovators, and we're going to use whatever means we have to get justice. That's what we do.
Yeah, that's right. Hillary, you have a question?
Yeah, I've been quiet the whole time just because I think your story is so amazing. And I will point out to any listeners that I am the glue that got all of this together, because I'm very fortunate to be writing for Bi Blacks and writing for Black in the Maritimes. So the Ontario transplant gets the benefit of all of the regionalism put into this one little body. I'm very happy about that. And I wanted to ask just the cliche question, and especially since I'm a part of it, where do you see Bi Blacks going in the future? Since, there was this racial revolution, as you said, but like you said, you've been doing a lot of things. There's that Black Food Week, and I'm curious to see where you see it going in the future.
Yeah, I would really love to build Bi Blacks to a place where we can build other content creators. So when I see people popping up with great content, I get so excited. And I'm like, I wish I had $1 million so I could say, okay, you, and you, we're gonna bring your podcast, Black in the Maritimes. We're gonna bring Brandon Gomez. We're gonna bring this person, that person, and it's all gonna be on a Bi Blacks channel where you can subscribe and flip and just subscribe, just get the content that you really love, and then everyone can make money together. And we can have a department working on sponsorship for you, working on this, so that we each content creator knows how hard it is, how much of a struggle it is to create content and to make money, to create content that people love, to pivot, to change, to like serve your audience, and then also find someone who wants to also sponsor that. It is exhausting. And I would love to grow to the point where we can be a bedrock for that type of collective content creation. So that's where I see us going, whether it's a Bi Blacks TV or just I haven't put my finger yet on what it would be called, but just some way that we could bring in other content and be that hub in Canada. Because like you said, like, we're not a huge community, right? And I always feel like, man, what's the point of us doing all this disparate work? Like, why can't we have, I mean, I love competitions, great. I love having, lots of different sites to go to. There's something for everyone. But, I hear that BET is coming to Canada, and they're going to be launching, if not already, they're going to be launching here. And I'm like, man, what like a missed opportunity for us to have made something homegrown that could have served our Black community here.
I think there's still time. I think there's still time. Even if BET comes, I think that they came to a little bit too little, too late. But hopefully they get something. So I mean, Camille, it's been a pleasure having you. I think we learned a lot from you, and hopefully we'll get you back or get your husband, because I think it's
He's another one.
I think you guys are pretty interesting. So if people want to find you, where do they go to find you and Bi Blacks?
Yeah, so we are at Bi Blacks, BYBLACKS, on all social media platforms. And you can find me personally on LinkedIn, connect with me there. I do respond to all my messages on LinkedIn. So feel free to connect with me there if you want to know anything or need advice.
All right. Well, Camille Dundas, thank you so much. Again, guys, thank you very much for listening to the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, whenever you get your podcasts. Follow us on social media at TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter at Black in the Maritimes, and give us a donation on PayPal or Patreon. Do you guys have anything else to say?
Thanks for listening. Clinton Davis on social media. Camille, it's such a pleasure to every other week we try to have a guest on, and we always learn so much. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing all your views with us.
Good to be here.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. I was really, really happy that you said yes and had the time to speak with us. And follow me at Cropberry, and then go to Bi Blacks and find my articles there and give them the same views that you're giving me and giving us.
Exactly. Reshare her amazing stuff. Love you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right. Peace.